What's up, guys? Happy Tuesday. We got the whiteboard. And I know that some of you are going to watch this video and you're going to think to yourself, this isn't what I want to be thinking about right now with the Seahawks. I want to be thinking about the current, the present, the here, the now, and I get it. I know some people are going to have that thought. They're going to be wishing that I made this video about something that affects the Seahawks right this moment, that affects the Seahawks going into this next game against Baltimore, and then the game after that in Atlanta. I get that. And I'm not saying we need to start thinking about the future with this team, but I've decided to make today's video about the near future because this is important too. But I could have made this video about the defense maybe, but I don't know what to say about the defense. They're not very good. They're not terrible. They need to get better. Pete Carroll and Ken Norton Jr. have 11 weeks to make them get better. That's really all I can say about that. I don't have any solutions. I don't have any players they can go get. I just know that the coaching needs to put them in better situations to succeed. Some people might want me to talk about Will Dissly, but I don't really know what to say about that. It sucks. That's really all I can say about it. He's not going to be somebody we can replace, and it's a big loss. I don't know how much it's going to hurt us in terms of the win-loss column, but that sucks. But that's all I can say about that. Some people might want me to talk about the Jalen Ramsey news hitting today. He got traded to the Rams, and some people might want me to make this video about that, but I also don't really know what to say about that, guys. It's intimidating. He's the best cornerback in the league outside of maybe Stephon Gilmore, and I'll tell you what, I would take Jalen Ramsey over Stephon Gilmore. I'm happy that the Rams continue to try to sell the future to win now, when I don't think they can win now because they have a bum quarterback. I don't believe in Jared Goff. They invested all that money in a running back who already looks like he's just about done. So, yeah, that's really all I can say about that. I can see it going both ways, and there's no way for me to know right now which way it's going to go. So I'm not going to make this video about any of those things. We're going to talk about the offensive line. And not really so much right now, but I'm talking about the future. Because even though this stuff is purely for the off season and we have 10 games left, this is really important. We have to get this right. Because we have a franchise quarterback who has the who has the biggest contract in the league. So we cannot mess the offensive line up. We have to get it right, or else we will find ourselves with an average football team next year, which is exactly what you don't want. We will have a team with a bad offensive line that can go 8-8 because the quarterback is so good, he gets you enough wins, and you're not in the playoffs, you don't have a top 5 pick, you're stuck. And when you have a franchise quarterback on your team making all the money that Wilson is making, that is exactly what you have to avoid. Not only because of all the money you're paying your quarterback, but just because it's a year of his prime that you can never get back and you've wasted because you weren't able to put a good team around him. So this is very important, and we're going to play a game. I call this game continuity or fresh blood. So we have 5 offensive linemen who start on this team, as all teams do. And we need to make decisions for each one of them. And the decision is quite simply continuity or fresh blood. Because you can make the argument either way for all 5 players on this offensive line. And I'm going to be going over those arguments. However, you cannot pick continuity for all 5 because clearly we need to get better there. And the only way you're going to do that is if you abandon a little bit of continuity. You also cannot pick fresh blood for all 5 options either, because if you decide to rip apart your whole offensive line and bring in 5 new guys, they're not going to be familiar with each other. They're not going to work well together. They're not going to play well together. And you're going to get your franchise quarterback killed. So we need to pick maybe 2 of these 5 guys. Maybe you can get away with 3. Kind of depends on how you replace them. But we need to replace some of these guys. We cannot replace all of them. So let's go down the list here. I'm going to start at the top with Dwane Brown, left tackle. Currently not playing for us, injured. I expect him to be back for the Atlanta game. That's what I'll say about that. But, okay. The argument for continuity with Dwane Brown is pretty simple. He's great. He is a great left tackle. He is by far the best offensive lineman on this team. In 2018, he made the All-Pro team, the second team All-Pro. So the rest of the world, the Associated Press, the writers, the voters, they respect him as a great offensive lineman. And the last time he had a healthy season, he committed one penalty all year, and he made the All-Pro team. Another argument for continuity would be, if we decide to cut Dwane Brown, which would be what we would do if we decide to move on, we have to eat $4 million in dead cap in 2020. Now, if we wait one more year, let him play in 2020, and then cut him in the 2021 offseason, our dead cap hit will be $2 million. So we cut our dead cap hit in half, which could be a big deal. $2 million, it means something, right? Now, is there a case to be made that you should go for the fresh blood? Let's go through this. Number one, he's old. By the time the 2020 season starts, he will be 35 years old. And this season already, at 34, we have seen signs that he is aging quickly. Some people say it's because he's playing injured. Some people say it's because he's getting old. But one way or the other, he doesn't look like his All-Pro self so far this year. And because that bicep injury, we might never see that All-Pro version of Dwane Brown this season. And that brings us to the next point, the injury. Is that going to sap his effectiveness for next year? Is it, it's a bicep. Those things can linger. Should we get out now? It's at least a discussion point. And finally, if we do move on from Dwane Brown, even though we have to eat the $4 million in dead cap, we still save $8 million because his salary, his cap hit next year, if kept, is $12 million. So we save $8 million, and we can go spend that $8 million on another offensive lineman or a defensive player or whatever. It's significant savings. So Dwane Brown, continuity or fresh blood. Okay, moving to the other tackle spot, Germain Ifedi, the much maligned, much insulted, much disregarded Germain Ifedi. Reasons for continuity, I can only think of two. He's in his prime in, I believe he turns, I'm sorry, I don't know how that happened, but I believe he turns 26 right before the season starts next year. So he's 26 next year, and that should be when an offensive lineman is entering his prime. So we don't have to worry about him suddenly like getting old, right? And the other reason why you might want to keep him on is that he will be cheap. I looked it up. The average offensive lineman or right tackle salary right now in the NFL, if you look at like the medium for a right tackle, is about $5 million. And Germain Ifedi, it has to be known that he is well below average as far as right tackles go. And I know he's young, and I know he's, a highly talented because he got drafted high, but we all have to understand he is well below average as far as right tackles go. I cannot imagine him costing any more than $4 million a year with whatever contract he happens to get. Now, as for why you should move on from Ifedi, number one, he's bad. He is. At best, he's been average. Last year, there were times where he looked average, but every other year, he's been somewhere between bad and atrocious. And this year, his contract year of all years, he's leaning towards atrocious. So we'd like to move on, but also, he's a free agent next year. We don't have to cut him. We don't have to eat any dead money. We don't have to do any salary cap stuff. We just say, hey, have fun on your next team. Go to Houston and play. You played for A&M in college. Go to Houston. Go to Dallas. Go play in your home state. Maybe that'll help you a little bit. I don't know, but we don't have to cut him. He's just gone. So those are the tackles. If you decide to move on from one or both of those guys, the in-house options to replace them are Jamarco Jones, who we might like better as a guard because he's playing guard pretty well right now, or George Fant, who, by the way, is a free agent. And if we want to bring him back and we indicate that we want him to actually start, I'm sure he will want more money than he's making right now as a backup. So we can expect Fant to want something in the range of $5 million a year. Moving on to the guards. Mike Upati, a guy we just picked up this offseason. So the reasons for continuity, which would be to keep him, would be, number one, I think he's pretty good. I think he's a good player. He had a terrible game against the Rams. Aaron Donald would make a lot of people have a bad game. In every other game, I think he's been pretty good. He was really impressing me with some of the stuff he did against the Browns, honestly. So I think he's a pretty good player. And the second reason to keep him would be he is cheap. He's making like $2.5 million this year. If he re-signed in Seattle, because he is going to be a free agent, I don't think he would ask for very much more than that. I can't imagine he would ask for much more than $3 million because there are still a lot of caveats with him. He is getting older, and I'm going to get into the reasons why he would not be in high demand. But this is a pretty reasonable price for a decent guard in the NFL. So the reasons to move on from Upati are he's kind of old. Next year he will be turning 33 years old, which is pretty old for an offensive lineman who was never amazing to begin with. It's not like Dwane Brown, who was making Pro Bowls in his prime and can still ball as a 34-year-old man. Upati was never that good. He's injury prone. You know, if we can get 15, 14 games out of Mike Upati this season, we might just want to cut our losses there and say, hey, he was good for us for a year, but we don't want to bring him back and have him only play 4 games next year because he gets hurt a lot. We don't want to risk that. We're going to move on. I can see that. And the final reason why it might be a good idea to move on would be he is a free agent in 2020. There's, again, no dead money, no cuts, no nothing. So that's Upati. Next, other starting guard, obviously, is DJ Fluker. And this is a very, very interesting one to me. You can make a really strong argument both ways. So why should we maintain continuity and keep DJ Fluker to start at right guard? First of all, he's okay. I'm not enamored with him like I was last year. He seems like he's a pretty good run blocker. I don't believe in his pass blocking abilities, really. Seems like he's getting Wilson killed more often than most other players on this offensive line. We've seen him have some very, very bad games this year. So I'm going to say he's okay, though, because of his run blocking. Second point is he's cheap. We have him under contract next year for $3.5 million. That's pretty good for an okay guard. You know, you don't hate life because you're paying even an average guard $3.5 million to start for you. Other reason to keep him would be if you cut him because he is under contract next year, you owe him $500,000 in dead cap in 2020. And the final point would be he is technically still in the tail end of his prime. He's going to turn 29 next year. 29 is not an age where you would expect an offensive lineman to fall off a cliff. Now, as for why we could maybe move on from Fluker, why we should do something different here, well, he's not good. I'm sorry, he's just not. He's okay. Maybe he's average. Maybe he's a little above average, but he's not good. And we have a quarterback who is starting to look like he's the best quarterback in the league. I really would like a guard who can actually protect him. And it doesn't seem like Fluker's that guy. Second point is if you cut him, you save $3 million on the cap. Even though you have to eat the $500,000 in dead, you do save $3 million, which you can then invest elsewhere. And finally, the obvious point is he's injury prone. He got injured a couple times last year. He got injured once already this year. It's just been a problem for him his whole career. So you're playing Russian roulette if you bring him back. So maybe it's at least good to plan for life without Fluker just because of that. So those are the guards. And to replace the guards in-house, you got to go with, well, Jamarco Jones is an option because he's playing guard right now and he looks pretty good at it. But in terms of actual natural guards, you have Jordan Roos. Haven't really seen anything from him to believe he can be the guy. Ethan Posick, who looks okay. I don't hate Posick. Jordan Simmons, who is a free agent after this season, but we can probably get him back really cheap for like $600,000 or something. So, you know, we can bring him back no problem, I'm sure. He's not a coveted asset in this league at all, especially after missing this whole season with an injury. But he's looked okay in a couple games. Demetrius Knox, rookie, not going to play this year really, it looks like. He's on the table. And Phil Haynes, who is also a rookie and has not played yet, but looks like he might actually see some action before long. So if you want to replace Upati and Fluker in-house, those are your guys. And last but not least, we're going to go to look at Justin Britt. So, keep him. You can argue he's decent. He's still a pretty good center. There was a time when he was a great center, and then he was a good center, and he's just been slowly declining these last couple years. This year, I would say he's still pretty decent. He had a terrible week 1, and since then he's been a lot better. I think week 1 he might have been playing hurt. I don't know. But it seems like he's still at least a decent center. He's in his prime, the end of his prime as far as age goes. Next year he's going to be turning 29. You're not going to necessarily think that an offensive lineman just loses his groove when he turns 29. So I'm not thinking that he's going to fall off a cliff all of a sudden. And the final reason to keep him would be if you cut him, you're eating almost $3 million in dead money in 2020. 2.9 million to be exact. Now, as for why to move on from Justin Britt, he's not really good anymore. Maybe we'll see something different over the last 10 games, but right now all I see is an inconsistent, decent center who has familiarity with the blocking scheme, familiarity with the offense, but he's not dominant. He's not anything special. I think you would have a decent chance of getting somebody better if you just went out in the second tier of free agency and looked around. And, why not move on if you have the opportunity to go get somebody who is actually good instead of just kind of good? And the last point is massive, massive salary cap savings if you cut him before the start of the season. We save just shy of $9 million on the cap. That is enough to go get, that's enough to pay for almost all of Tyler Lockett's salary next year, just as an example. That's enough to pay for maybe 2, 3, maybe even 4 backup offensive linemen, Now, if you want to replace Britt in-house, your only option is Joey Hunt, and he's a free agent. So you'd have to bring him back on a deal. I can't believe it will be more than $1 million because he's making like $700,000 this year, and he's not doing anything to show that he was worth more than that. He might want a little bit of a pay bump if you tell him, hey, you're going to start. But either way, we can bring him in and start if we want to, but that's your in-house option. So I'll say it again. Cannot replace all these guys, but we cannot bring all 5 of them back. We have to start transitioning to the next offensive line. And maybe we have 1 or 2 guys on this roster who can fit in with that plan. But what we need to do is transition while staying good or competent. I'm not going to say the current offensive line is good, but we need it to stay competent enough for us to win games and unleash Russell Wilson, because if we try to throw out a bunch of rookies and random free agent signings next year, guys who just joined the team, it's going to be a disaster. Wilson's going to get killed. Wilson might get hurt, and we're all going to be pissed off about it. So my thinking is that you may as well keep Dwane Brown because he's got 2 years left on his deal. I really think we're going to move on from Britt. I really think we're going to move on from Affetti. I think we can keep Upati because he's not going to be expensive. Fluker, I'm really, really torn on. I don't know what I want to do with Fluker. That's kind of the difficult one to me. But I feel like Britt has to go because we're going to save a ton of money, and we don't want to see him regress to a below average center, which is very possible next year. And I think Affetti is just like there's too much baggage there. But what do you think? What would you do? How would you manage this? The only backup offensive lineman on this team who I really believe in for being, maybe a long-term answer is Jamarco Jones, because he was good in college and he's been good so far in the pros. And the only reason why he hasn't played very much yet is because he got hurt as a rookie. But I kind of like Posick, but I don't believe he's a full-time starter. Kind of like Fant, don't believe he's a full-time starter. So I think we would have to go get 1 guy in the draft who can start day 1 and maybe go get 1 high-profile free agent. That's my take. What's yours? Do you think we can bring all 5 guys back and just run it back in 2020? Do you think all 5 of these guys can go and we can somehow magically put together an offensive line in one off season that doesn't get Wilson's head taken off? What do you think? All right, that's my video for today. Something to think about for y'all. I'm not forgetting about this team's present, but I wanted to look at the near future because you cannot rebuild with Russell Wilson. You can't. If you do that, somebody screwed up big time and somebody needs to get fired. So I will not accept that. Build me an offensive line that can at least play at a below average level, and we'll go from there. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks. Gonna make a video probably Thursday or Friday pregame. I'm gonna make a video on Sam Dog's channel like I'm doing every week now, and see you guys then.